Hollinger. I am the CEO of the Greater Washington Partnership, and I want to welcome everyone to the 7th annual Capital Region Transportation Forum. 7 years. As we start out today, I do want to offer a few acknowledgments and thank yous. First and foremost to Jack McDougall, CEO of the Greater Washington Board of Trade, who is, yes, our partner in this wonderful event, in co-creating it with the Board of Trade, but really throughout all the work that we do in the transportation space, but in the region as we move the region forward. This event is a great example of the constructive collaboration between our two organizations. So I want to thank you, Jack, and your entire team. And I also want to thank the Greater Washington Partnership team. So why don't we give them both a huge round of applause for putting this together. Thank the MLK Library for opening their doors in this beautiful venue, a true asset in the heart of downtown DC, not only for the city, but for the entire region. And to our supporting sponsors today, EXP, HNTB, Transurban, and our community partners, Northeast Magla and WSP. This is today a critical moment to gather our region's transportation leaders and stakeholders. And without all of you, we would not be able to do this work. So thank you to all of you. We have a very full agenda today, very good agenda. We'll hear discussions on Metro's future, including the challenge of funding, sustainable funding. We will also hear from Senator Mark Warner in a little bit about transportation and infrastructure opportunities and challenges at the federal level. And then we will hear from our state and district transportation executives about their priorities and challenges. We are a very unique region. We have 3 jurisdictions coming together to form a shared labor market, a shared economy, and transportation network. And we can only make this progress together as we look to the future. This is part of the mission of the partnership, working with organizations like the Board of Trade and stakeholders, building forums like this one to elevate our shared challenges and promote cross-sector and multi-jurisdictional solution development. As a nonprofit alliance of leading employers from Maryland and Virginia and Washington, D.C., we are, as an organization, committed to championing regional economic growth. And our alliance of board partners supports 620,000 jobs throughout the region, 1 in every 16 positions connected to our work. So given this wide footprint, we define our region as Baltimore to Richmond, stretching from Baltimore to Richmond. I am starting to use the word stretching to not at all suggest we skip over the district. It is through the district. Given this very wide footprint, our leading employers know that regional mobility is necessary to expand access and opportunity to bolster our economic competitiveness. So for a moment, I would like to share how we at the partnership approach our transportation-related work in terms of tools that we create and how we share those tools more broadly. In 2018, and I think we have some slides that are going up, in 2018, the partnership created the region's first employer-led, action-oriented, super-regional transportation strategy. This blueprint was designed with one clear goal, and that is to transform our transportation system into a powerful engine of global competitiveness. Earlier this year, we refreshed that 5-year blueprint and published a critical assessment of our progress to date, but also a roadmap for the next 5 years as we consider our strategic transportation initiatives and investments. And this refresh was not created in isolation. It was shaped by insights of over 100 stakeholders, many of whom are in the room, Board of Trade included in that. And as we examined our progress and adapted to a post-pandemic reality, 3 urgent priorities emerged as we considered this refresh and path forward for the next 5 years. First and foremost, and Randy, I think you would appreciate this the most, is securing sustainable funding for Metro. We know that that is a non-negotiable, but the message from business and institutional leaders is clear that Metro matters and that it is not just a transit system, but it is an investment and an asset in our region's future. Our workforce depends on safe, reliable, and frequent transit service. Metro's current funding model, while unsustainable, we must look to end the cycle of budget uncertainty that impacts riders, jurisdictions, and Metro's workforce. And through initiatives like DMVMoves, which you will hear about a little bit more in terms of updates later, we are actively, as a collective of thought leaders around the region, working towards solutions. Second priority, we must seize the moment to restore DC as a world-class rail hub. We're seeing unprecedented momentum from the groundbreaking of the new Long Bridge to the transformative Frederick Douglass Tunnel project in Baltimore. Union Station stands ready to become the next modern nexus connecting these improvements, creating a seamless rail corridor throughout the region. This is not, again, just about transportation. The Union Station expansion project really represents a transformative economic opportunity for the entire region and the entire Northeast corridor. Third, transit-oriented development is reimagining our region's future. So when we are building housing and retail near transit, we are creating opportunities for inclusive economic growth and improved quality of life. We're seeing this strategy succeed all across the region, thriving development along the Silver Line, ambitious plans for the Purple Line station areas, and the innovative Blue Line corridor in Prince George's County. So while we talk about the blueprint, and we will often, as we have refreshed this roadmap, we created it in 2018, refreshed it in 2024, and it's really more than just a partnership initiative. This is a tool that was informed by the region and created for the region. And while we all in our businesses, organizations have very keen priorities, this was one that was informed by all, and we want all to use it. It's a roadmap that we think can be used collectively to advance these priorities and strengthen our region's competitive edge. So thank you for indulging me in that moment of a wonderful tool that I hope you will use or come to us and ask more about. I now have the pleasure of getting us started and introducing our first speaker of the day, Randy Clarke, who is the General Manager and CEO at WMATA. Randy joined WMATA in 2022 at a time of significant change, and he has been a great partner in the years since. He brings tremendous energy to this city and to this region. Before joining Metro, Randy led Austin's transit agency for more than 4 years and held other key leadership positions in public transportation around the country. As you know, Metro continues to recover from the pandemic and decades of deferred maintenance. Randy has unmatched energy as an advocate for the system. I think we can say Randy has unmatched energy. He is going to provide an update and will inform efforts to establish long-term sustainable funding that supports a reliable and safe transit system. So I am delighted to welcome to the stage or to the mic, Randy Clarke.
All right, apparently I gotta bring some energy. That's what I'm told. So, good morning everyone. Great crowd, thank you all for being here. Hope you had a great Metro trip coming. If you didn't take Metro, feel guilty. And I'll make sure I remind you. I just want to thank Jack, Kathy, Greater Washington Partnership, Board of Trade for hosting this great event. Really appreciate being here. Want to recognize we have some board members here. I see board member Rick Andrew, board member Tracy Lowe, Vice Chair Smedberg, Mike Goldman from Maryland, and I don't think our new chair Valerie Santos is here yet, but I just want to really recognize our board members. We have a great thing going on at Metro, the board, staff working incredibly well together, collaborative approach to drive things forward. So just want to recognize them and the Metro staff that are here, all the good work they're doing. I guess I got to say next slide because I don't have a clicker. So these are the little topics we're going to cover today, but we'll get rolling really quickly because I'm told I got to speak relatively quickly with a big audience. Here's some highlights by the numbers. A couple I want to call out specifically that I'm really proud of this team. Just last week was our 9th consecutive clean audit. So when you hear people talk about financial management and all these types of things, 9 years of clean audits for a big organization like ours is a big thing to be proud of. 54% decrease in rail safety incidents over the last 2 years, so it continued to drive safety. We're the leading rail transit safety organization in the country. 31% reduction in crime, so last quarter was the lowest crime quarter in 5 years. So when people say there's a lot of crime all over the place, we took it on head on. I'm really proud of the police chief and the team. And the two I'm most proud of would be 83%, which is our customer satisfaction for bus, and 92% for rail, both the highest in the history of Metro. Again, the highest in the history of the organization, customers saying they like what they're getting out of Metro. So that's a big deal. That was supposed to be an applause break. I just wanted to... Didn't know I had to trigger that up. Remember the energy, right? Okay, so next slide. Where Metro goes, the region grows. You all know that. And I think Kathy really mentioned that well, whether it connects to the COG, TOD, kind of goals, whatnot. Record highs at Anoma Station, 40-year-over-year change in McLean. Look at these numbers, right? $9.4 billion of economic activity near where Metro is, $330 billion of property within the Metro half-mile station areas, and we generate about $3.2 billion of regional tax. So basically, wherever Metro goes is where our economy is thriving. Next slide, please. I want to take a few moments, this is a little deep section, to really talk about Metro's financial management, but the structural funding challenge at Metro. So things that we're trying to do the best we can at the agency, but still challenging parts. Okay, so the next slide. October, 43 consecutive months of ridership growth at Metro, and what I'm really proud of, Metro Bus leads the nation in ridership recovery on the bus side, and through October, we are the #1 in ridership growth among all U.S. rail systems in the country. And you can see we're 13% above what we were last year. So every week, every month, ridership continues to grow. We're growing at peak, off-peak, weekends. We carry more people on the bus system now than we did before the pandemic, more people on weekends than we did on rail before the pandemics. All of our special events are driving things. And I think it's fair to say we expect maybe some more people back to the office at the end of January, and we'll continue to see peak hours continue to grow. I don't know what happened. Okay, next slide, please. Strong financial management. We have some members of our team here. Listen, I want to be really clear. We've been pushed really hard to be very transparent and to push hard on saving money. But internally, I want everyone to know, we want to do that too. There really might be a philosophical debate on where we take that savings and put it to. Most of us in transit, they want to run more service, but it doesn't change the fact we want to be as cost efficient as possible. We all pay taxes, we all live here, and we're really proud of that. So a couple things I want to highlight on this slide. First, on the left side, rail fare evasion. #1 thing I heard when I got here, too many people not paying their fare. We did new gates, appreciate the collaboration in DC with changing the law, put the police out heavily. Rail fare evasion is down 82% on the rail side. Paid trips are up significantly. We did a 12.5% increase in fares to deal with inflation, which I think was only fair. Look at Q1. Q1 ridership is up 9% compared to last year. Revenue, we're $17 million above budget, 14% than overall. And now we've revised to have 255 million trips on this system in FY25. On the right side, so that's basically saying ridership and revenue are going exactly in the direction we want. The other side is we want cost management to go down, right? In 2 years, we've identified over $500 million of savings at Metro, and we're running more service than we did. So again, reiterate, we're doing more of what we are expected to do for $500 million of savings. $275 million in operating budget, and in capital, and $257 in operating. A couple things I want to highlight here. I want to thank our partners at ATU, right? Labor negotiations are always hard, but we got a 0 out of the union over our 4 years, so we have a 0, 3, 3, 3.5. All employees, therefore, at Metro, myself, all non-reps, union, took a 0 in this fiscal year. That is an incredibly hard thing to do in a very hard hiring market, right? So a lot of staff that are working even harder took a 0 to help with this crisis. We also got some bargaining aspects done to avoid the big spikes in the CBA, so really thankful for ATU's collaboration on that. And we're delivering a 0 growth budget in FY25. So you put all that together, we are going at this very hard, whether it's running more 6-car train sets, looking at all of our specs, our guidelines, our standards. Everything is being touched at Metro to drive cost efficiency. There's not a lot left, I don't think, but we work really hard and we're not going to ever stop working to try to drive every dollar we can for productive service. Next slide, please. I think this part is crucial, though, for people to talk about how transit costs work. There's fixed and variable costs, like every type of organization, but we're incredibly high fixed costs. So take the rail section as an example. No matter how many trains an hour we run, we're going to have track, power, signals, control center, you name it, that has to be maintained and inspected. So for every extra trip we run, the variable cost is incredibly small. So 80% of our rail costs are more or less fixed. So basically, whether we run 5 trains on the red line an hour or 30 trains, there's very little cost difference. So what we're trying to do is lower our fixed costs as best we can, as those efficiencies I mentioned, so we can run the right amount of more service in targeted areas, because the cost to do that is so little because we have to spend so much to run the assets anyway. Again, how to be more efficient with everything we're doing. Just really want to highlight that because we hear a lot. Why don't you just cut? To get big cuts, it means we are cutting deep into service. To add service, costs, I don't want to say nothing, but very, very little. Next slide, please. We are running great service, a lot of ways because the staff is doing a great job, and this region has invested in Metro. And part of that is getting our state of good repair in a good place. The system is in good shape. Perfect? Absolutely not. Signals is where we have to, I'll talk about that in a quick second. But this overall, we're in a pretty healthy house. And a lot of people work very hard to get us here, and that's very much appreciated. As you'll see, on-time performance, doing very well. We still want to shoot a little bit higher, and as we go into automatic train operation, we expect that to increase even higher, and reliability. Reliability of rail car vehicles. Last year, we ran the most reliable heavy rail fleet in America, and the system has decreased smoke and fire incidents by 70% since 2017. So the system is in good shape. I'll challenge you all to say, be with me, that we're not going to go back. Oh, maybe it's too soon. Okay, that was too soon. Sorry, keep forgetting what city I'm in here. But we can't go back to where we were in 2017, right? We had a lot of track fires, lots of problems. The system is running well because of those investments. Next slide, please. So, our deficit threatens all that progress in state of good repair. Part of the issue is the PREA money out of the federal government, which is very much appreciated, and the dedicated capital funds that people worked on here in 18 into 19, they were never indexed. So the equivalent to Social Security today being worth a couple bucks for someone that might be 90 years old getting their check. We need to index things. Now we can have a policy debate on what the index should be. Is it CPIW? Is it construction index? Is it some other type of 3%, some inflationary mark, but we have to index things. And that did not happen. So now we have a deficit coming, and if we don't do that, this line indicates where our state of good repair program is going to go. We are going to drop significantly from about 2.4 billion a year, give or take what we spend, and it's going to go down significantly, and problems are going to happen. We all know what's going to happen if we get there. It's going to cost even more money to dig ourselves back out of the hole we just created. Different way to look at this on the next slide. Unfortunately, internally, we call this Big Red. Now, Big Red has come down a lot in 2 years, which we're really proud of the effort, but Big Red still exists. The reason you have this arrow where it says 0.4 and 0.8 is the 2018 capital dollars allow us to do financing. So we sell bonds and finance. But because it wasn't indexed, we don't have enough capacity to get to a revolving or rotational bond program. So, right now, we've been doing 2 things. One, we've been stealing capital money to pay for operating budget. Never a good thing to do. Now we're doing that a little less than we planned on doing last year, but we're still doing too much of it. And number two, cost of inflation on all of our projects went up significantly. So if you look at this, we are now going to run out of that debt capacity around FY28. There's a chance we stretch it into 29, but generally give or take 28. The way we do capital, that means we need to start making decisions this year into next year on what we're not going to do, because when you buy rail vehicles or big construction projects, they are years in the making. So I say that we have a crisis today, even if it looks like it's an FY28. Okay, just clearing everyone. Today we have a crisis that is years. Next slide, please. So what we need to keep the region moving, we need to baseline our stuff. So if we got a 3% baseline index on operating, if we can get $140 million by FY28, that means we will stop stealing from the capital program into operating. And if we tie that to 3%, and Jack has said this to me, and he said, please be more overt with this statement. Metro can commit to maintaining current service levels with that investment. Because that way, we know we have our growth at 3%, and it's baseline to where we are. And then Metro has to live within its means on 3% to do that operating. To me, that's a fair thing that Metro must be able to accomplish and live within its means. But we got to get our baseline correct. We did most of it last year, but we couldn't get to the whole piece. 140 and FY28 dollars would actually do that on the operating side. And again, this is Metro, all three state 140, right? Not individual state. Next slide. Now on the capital side, as I mentioned, PREA and dedicated funding not indexed, that's worth $340 million. If we had indexed both, we'd have $340 million more today. So if we get our baseline reset and we index, same thing that I think, Jack, the business community, and a lot of stakeholders are looking for us to say at Metro. Metro then can commit to maintaining state of good repair with that investment, because that will have enough to get into rotation or a revolving bond program. So as bonds expire in, say, 2045, we'll have that cash to do new bonds. The state of good repair program should, in theory, never have a problem again. Rail cars, tunnels, signals, power, all of those things, buses, should be in a nice rotational piece. So it's, again, what I mentioned, the 140, the 340, right? Those are base and index them. The next slide. To get more out of our system, though, we estimate about $120 million more can get us running the best regional system with the assets we have. We need more bus service in this region, even on top of better bus network redesign. So this would get us 15 more routes on our, added to our 48 service network right now. And we could do more rail service. Eventually, we're going to need bigger peaks, right? And especially if more people come back to the office quicker. We're going to need more 8 cars. We want to open at 6 a.m. again, and we need to close at 2 a.m. again on the weekends. We got our wrench time overnight worked out, so we can actually do that more efficiently now. That is the world-class region that we know we are, and we got to deliver the service. So this is, I think, where DMVMoves is really focused on this as well. So in summation, if you look at the next slide, 140, 340, 120, $600 million gets us what we run today, state of good repair, and more service on top of the assets we have. So meaning we run every bus and every train as cost efficient as possible and get the biggest investment out of this big, huge thing that we have in the region. Okay, so the next slide. If we're going to do all that, though, we also then have some longer term issues that we got to think about, right? Because to me, that's kind of the foundation. These are what I just mentioned up to $600 million, those are things we have to do. And whether we do them at once or not, it doesn't change. Those things all have to get done. Here's where we really are, though. Sorry, next slide. You have a monitor here, you get a look. So the next slide. Let's talk about ourselves as a region, though. So at one point, we were on the left. This region came together in the 60s and said, hey, we need a unified transit vision, and we're going to be millions of people bigger. And so we went from that, we built that out, and now we have what's on the right. We don't have a unified regional vision for transit. We have a lot of great partners, many in the room. We got tons of plans, but we don't have an integrated regional network. We don't have regional integrated thinking. We have a lot of localized thinking, and then we got metro thinking. And I challenge us, we need to become more integrated, more efficient, move more people on transit, because that's the whole game. How do we get people in cars? How do we get people more housing near transit? How do we make life better here for people that live in this region? We got to figure this out. We have really become this confederation versus a unified region. And I know that's real hard with 3 states, but people move regionally, not jurisdictionally. And we got to think about how we all come closer together. And I'm not saying that's Metro runs everything. I'm going to be crystal clear. But there got to be ways that we can kind of be closer together as one integrated region. The next slide. Here's where Metro really needs to think about the $600 million. The 2 most important things for us at Metro, we need to think about our advanced signaling system. We have a 1970 signaling system as our base. We need to get towards full automated trains. That's the future of Metro. It's how Europe runs, it's how Asia runs, and the reason they run that way. It's the safest, most reliable, most cost-efficient trains in the world. And that's a good example of Paris and London, right? We are not keeping up with the world capitals, period. And we need to get this. If we don't, signaling will become a problem here where we'll go back to the teens and we'll have delayed trains and big problems. Second, we need a regional BRT bus program. We need this, all of us, right? There we go. The regional planning leads to better fleet management, facility management, workforce. And as long as we all do it separately, we're never going to have a good regional approach to BRT. Again, Metro doesn't have to run it all, but we have to all agree what are the priorities for BRT as our region, because it all connects together. After that, the next slide shows the 2 other problems that we have. We have flaws in the system as they were put together, right? Blue, orange, silver from Roslyn to Stadium Armory has been a choke point. It's been talked about at Metro for 20 years, study after study. We're going to have to do something, right? Right now, we have an infrastructure law where we're leaving money on the table. Regions all over America are getting projects, and we have none in the pipeline. It's the first time in the history of Metro where we have nothing in design or construction. Right? Think about that. One of the most powerful, important regions in the world, and we have nothing planned. And all these other people do. So we need to solve this choke point at Roslyn Tunnel, and we have to also work on things like Foggy Bottom Station that only has 1 entrance. It's our busiest 1 entrance of the whole system. Farragut needs to get connected, which it should have been at the start. Metro Center and Gallery should be connected, which it wasn't at the start. There's easy things to do to make this system work a lot better. So I end with the last slide, which is we need to think about a bigger future, right? So I hear a lot about what are we doing, and we got to move past from counting staples to thinking about the future, right? I think we've shown in 2 years we're managing every dollar we can perfectly, or not perfectly, but as best as we can. Ridership is growing faster than anywhere else in the country. Customer satisfaction. I challenge all of us to say, are we going to invest in Metro when it's doing well, or only when it's falling apart? And I would suggest it's much better, much more efficient to keep investing in Metro when it's doing well and not have to go back to a crisis, right? So we're the national capital, the most powerful, rich country in the history of time, and we should all want the best subway and bus system to represent that, you know? So COG, and I appreciate Clarke is in the audience somewhere, his leadership and all the leadership of COG, they put these plans together. 320,000 new housing units in our region. Almost all of them are near transit, right? We have environmental goals, all going to be delivered by more people on transit. So us as a region, we're going to have to get all modes, all partners, all about moving more people on transit. We need integrated ticketing. We need to think about our bike share program. We need to think about water. We need to think about regional rail, integrated bus, integrated metro. We can do this. It's done in a lot of other places in the world. And I think this is our time to really bring the DMV together. So I just want to thank everyone for all of your support. We're trying to do everything we can at Metro. And I just look forward to all of our other panelists and us being a really united region, bringing mobility forward. So again, thanks Jack and Kathy for the opportunity to do this.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Charles Allen. I am a DC council member, and this year I'm also the chair of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. Paul Smedberg and I are the co-chairs of the DMVMoves project. We've been spending so much time together that we didn't even talk this morning, but we basically wore the same tie. But Randy, thank you so much for walking through and getting what I think is everybody excited about where we have to go. And I think as we heard the general manager talk about the great work that has been happening at WMATA over this last year, ridership continues to grow incredibly strong. Customer satisfaction is at an all-time high. Public safety continues to improve. It is a bus and a rail system that is serving our region very, very well. It has continued to be on the upswing. But it also, as the General Manager talked about, it is fragile, I would say. That as we see this crisis coming, as we see the funding and the challenges ahead of us, it also creates an opportunity. And that's what our DMVMoves process and project is all about. It is a regional partnership and coalition of elected leaders, of transit leaders, of operators, to help think through how we meet this moment and how do we put our region in the best position to be able to tackle what we see in front of us. If we know it is going to cost $600 million to be able to maintain the level of service that is serving our region very well as continue to grow where it's got to go, that's a challenge. And I think as a region, we can meet it. We've done it before. As a region, we have met these challenges before. It is time for us to do it again. And it's time for us to do it in a way that we don't find ourselves back in 4 or 5 years scrambling for the next crisis and just bounce from crisis to crisis. And I think that's the challenge we certainly feel as the opportunity presents itself as a region to really think about how to create all those efficiencies talked about. How do we bring all of this together? Some of it is around optimizing the services and delivery and transit that we have. Some of it is around thinking about the future, where we're going to go. My challenge to everybody here, my ask of everybody here, if you are a business leader, if you are an employer, if you are a part of this conversation happening across the region, we need you to lift your voice up and speak more strongly about why this is so important. It is so much more than just about public transit. Our metro system and our entire transit system is what moves our region economically. It is what moves people with our jobs. It is what moves the millions of visitors that come to our region. It is what is driving our economy. I really implore you to think about this as an economic investment in our entire region to make sure that our transit system, which obviously WMATA is a major part of, but I would say it is broader than that, and that gets that unified vision. Our very big ask for you is to help raise your voice, push on us, push on your local leaders, push on the Council of Governments, on WMATA, on all of us, to really help deliver what it is we need, but we need your voice to really speak up and talk about why this is so important and why you see this as part of the growing economy of our entire region. It's something that I'm very proud of working on this past year. I think we met a big moment last year with the collaboration with Paul Smedberg, who is a great friend and a leader, and as a co-chair, we've really worked hard to help foster and bring this group together. So I want to turn it over to my co-chair, Paul Smedberg, to help share a little about, as well, the continued progress and the work that we're making happen here.
Thank you, Council Member, and good morning, everyone. I'm Paul Smedberg. I'm Vice Chair of the WMATA Board and co-chair with Council Member Allen of the DMVMoves Task Force. I want to take this moment to introduce my fellow WMATA Task Force members, Dr. Lowe from the District of Columbia, Sarah Klein, who is our federal government representative on the board, and MDOT Assistant Secretary Joe McAndrew. And thank you for being here for this truly important conversation. I want to emphasize something again that we heard in part of Randy's presentation here today, and the important role that Metro plays in our economy. $9.4 billion in business output and economic activity is supported by transit. $330 billion total value of property within Metro station areas, and $3.2 billion in tax revenue generated by Metro station areas. It also connects our airports, MARC to BWI. I see Mr. Potter here from National and Dulles. So this is an important system and an economic driver, and it's the one thing that brings this entire region together. To help drive this work, the task force created the Community Partners Advisory Group, chaired by the Greater Washington Board of Trade CEO, Jack McDougall, and the Government Partners Advisory Group, chaired by Fairfax County Executive Brian Hill. These groups have been meeting monthly to discuss the needs of our transit system, funding, priorities, and potential paths forward. I want to emphasize something the council member said. This is an unprecedented chance to propel our region forward by creating a comprehensive, unified plan for transportation in this region. From putting WMATA on stable financial footing to realigning the rider experience and use, no matter what system they're using. And we have to make the appeal to you. You are the leaders in this region, and as Ms. Hollinger said in the beginning, your voice is so important in this debate. We need to hear from you. We can't just hear from our customers. We need to hear from you, and we're also working with our political leaders in the region, many of whom are on the task force. Now, we'll hear from the advisory group chairs, along with the DMVMoves staff consultant, Nick Donahue, on the progress so far and expected outcomes and next steps. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Is this coming through? Yeah. You know, Shep said he was going to play a trick on me. He just didn't tell me what it was going to be this morning. We're going to try to. Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me also? So it was clearly operator error. You'll get a little bit more of that from me this morning, so don't worry. First of all, I just want to thank you all for coming out this morning and being here with us. My name is Nick Donahue. I'm the facilitator of the DMVMoves Initiative. I'm here with Jack McDougall and Brian Hill, and we're going to talk about what's happening with DMVMoves, what we've been finding about, what we've been talking, and what are some kind of the key things as we move forward. This morning, we really heard how transit is critical. Shouldn't have that sausage. How transit is critical to the economic competitiveness of this region. We've heard from the business community. We heard from government officials. We don't often hear government and business agree on things. And so we have to know there's some truth to the importance of transit for this region when we hear different stakeholders with very, very different perspectives saying the same thing and talking about the importance of transit. Randy's telling me that the mic is, not close enough. We're here today to talk about some of the important needs that transit in this region has. The GM laid out the big needs about WMATA, but I want to stress this isn't just a WMATA issue. We also have other transit systems in this region that have significant needs. It's also not just a DMV issue. This is a national problem that transit agencies are facing across the country for a number of reasons. One of the biggest reasons, again, is obviously the COVID pandemic, its impact on ridership, but also its impact on cost. We've seen significant inflation, changes in work patterns, and a whole host of other things that have impacted the transit systems throughout the country. So you go to LA, you go to Philly, you go to Boston, you go to San Francisco, they're having this exact same discussion. So this isn't like 2018 when we were here in the DMV region, and it was a WMATA kind of only topic, and you weren't seeing the same types of discussions in these other major metro areas. This is happening across the country. And the good news is some of the things that have led to these impacts are starting to be addressed. The GM talked about the zero budget growth, how ridership is returning. We're now at pre-pandemic levels on the bus. We're having healthy rail ridership recovery. So we're on our way back. But this region also has other things that are compounding the challenges to our regional transit system that we're going to talk about as well. And Randy hit on some of those, particularly for WMATA when it deals with the 2018 funding and the PRIA. Resources don't grow. We've been borrowing against them. We basically run out of the ability to borrow here in 2 years. That kind of sounds like an abstract thing when I say that. Like, well, what does that mean? Okay, we can't borrow. So what? It's a big so what. What that actually means is basically, absent some sort of intervention, we have a 40% reduction in WMATA's capital budget. Since 2018, we've been able to bring the backlog of WMATA down from $7 billion to around $4 billion. If all of a sudden 40% of the capital budget goes away, think about what the impacts will be to the progress that we've made improving WMATA's state of good repair conditions. We also talked though about like bus priority and other needs in this region. And if you think there's 14 different transit operators in this region, if we today set up a new transit system for the DMV area, I assure you we would not set it up with 14 different operators. Yet that's where we are. And so we have challenges because we need to create a more integrated and seamless system with making these 14 operators work together, but also working toward how do we get towards a regional vision. And these are some of the challenges that we're talking about at DMV Moves. And so Jack, I want to turn to you to get us kind of kicked off here. You know, DMV Moves is a task force that consists of elected officials and appointed officials. You chair an advisory group with community partners, and Brian chairs an advisory group with business partners. What's been really the focus to date, and what are some of like the key things that we've been talking about that this group could really benefit from hearing about?
Great, thanks. Thanks, Nick and Brian. This has been a really great experience to start to really think through a strategic vision for our transit systems. Also, Kathy, thank you for partnering with us, and thank you everybody for coming out today and engaging with us in this conversation. Let me set a little context first. You know, we have a pretty amazing region here. We're currently about 6.2 million people. We have assets that are the envy of the world. Sure, we have challenges. We have some pretty big challenges that we're grappling with. We're the 5th largest economy in the country. We're the 25th largest economy in the world between Sweden and Poland. So we've got a lot going on here. And so part of what Randy was saying too is that, you know, our desire, our aspiration to have a world-class transit system matches with what our aspirations are to be a world-class, competitive, inclusive economy. And so they really do tie together. And so I think it's really important when we set out how we're thinking about these things, to put it in some of those terms. You know, the other thing here too, one thing that we're not very proud of is that we're the 3rd most congested region in the country. That's not a good thing, you know, and for anybody that drove today, you know, maybe it was just, you know, a smooth ride in, maybe it wasn't. You know, we've run out of parking spaces in DC, so getting around this region is a challenge, and that's hindering us. That's hindering our ability to attract and retain talent. It's hindering our ability to attract and retain investment. And so as we think about how do we grow and how do we continue to invest in our quality of life, we have to think very holistically about how we're going to move people around. And so I think one of the things from our advisory committee, you know, and I've got Elizabeth here representing bikers, and for those of you who don't know, I walk to work every morning from Arlington to downtown DC. I ride Metro home. Last year I was a top 9% rider, and that's only because I walk to work, otherwise it'd be a lot higher. You know,
We'll see this year.
well, it's going to be probably even less, but you know, because there's more people riding this year, so I'm probably going to come down. So we need a very healthy, integrated system where all the parts of the system are working together and complementing one another. And so when we think of what we're talking about here too is around transit, transit is a backbone around that. So one of the things, so two quick things to answer your question, then we'll get into some more detail. One thing that I think was pretty amazing about our advisory committee, when we first started, we were presented a draft vision for our work, and that vision was a transit system that was reliable, safe, on time, and all the traditional things that you would think. And so the diversity of participants, you know, again, we have transit advocates, we have bike, we have pedestrian advocates, we have labor, we have businesses. So we have a pretty broad mix of individuals working with us on these challenges. We all agreed that transit is more than that. Those are tactics. Those are goals that we achieve through putting an effective system in place. But what transit enables us to do as the backbone of an integrated mobility system, it allows us to achieve our equity goals. It allows us to achieve our climate goals. It allows us to tap into the best that this region has to offer. It reduces the friction in our economy. It improves our overall output. I've seen estimates that congestion in our region costs us $9 billion a year. That's money that could be put to much better use doing other things. And so when we're talking about this, we're not just talking about trains and buses. We're talking about the quality of our region and what we want our region to represent to the world. So I do think that that's a really important message that I would like people to take away from. And we can get into some of the more details and tactics there. The other thing I want to say too, at the last task force meeting, Charles asked us, he said, what do you need? And Brian and I were sitting there and looking at each other and it's like, we need carte blanche. We need you guys to give us, empower us to leave nothing off the table. Everything is in part of the conversation here. And so that's the direction that we've been taking our conversations. And so we will really be digging into these issues in a way that we as a region have not done in a long time. And so I was giving us maybe 50-50 starting this effort about a year ago, and I'm up now to maybe around 80-20. You want to go higher than that? 90-10? But failure's not an option. We've got to solve for this for all the reasons that Randy pointed out, that Charles, Paul pointed out, and others are going to point out today. Failure's not an option. So we really do need to come to the table. We need to put the past behind us, and we need to start building for the future. And I know that's not going to be easy, but we're the most highly educated and skilled region in the country. We can do this.
And I think I also want to talk a little bit, thanks Jack for that. I also want to talk a little bit about, it's not just the financial issues that we talked about when it comes to getting to a world-class transit system. We've heard a lot from some of the folks, particularly in Jack's advisory group, about they ride transit across jurisdictional boundaries. And to say they describe that as pleasant would be to mislead you. They have said that it can be confusing, sometimes the schedules aren't coordinated, different transit providers provide information in different ways. And I want to give a shout out to Ra Amin, who I'm not sure if he's here or not today, but he is on COG, he's the chair of COG, Citizen Transportation Advisory Committee. And he said, improving the ability of people to use the different transit systems in the region to travel throughout the region, beyond obviously making sure the service is running, Randy, is one of the most important things the advisory committee at COG thought could be done to help improve transit in this region. Now the irony of this is we've all identified a whole host of policies for decades that could improve transit in this region. There's been a report X, report Y, and the report comes out and then the initiative kind of ends. One of the other things Jack, Brian, and myself are trying to do with DMV Moves is make sure that doesn't happen this time. So whether it's fair policy, whether it's wayfinding, whether it's signage, opportunities for shared services like the GM mentioned for cost efficiencies, we are actually moving those forward today while DMV Moves is in place and having those difficult conversations about, we all think this is a great idea. You all nod your head when we say this would be a good thing to happen. Why haven't we done it? And what do we need to do to make sure that it actually happens and that we move the ball forward? Because getting the funding will be very important, and that is critical, as Jack just noted, but we also have to address these other issues to create a more seamless and integrated transit system across these 14 different operators, and that is a big part of what DMV Moves is also doing.
Yeah, and thank you, Nick, and thank you, Jack, for allowing me this opportunity here. You know, as the county executive of Fairfax County, I'm looking at a holistic approach. Obviously, we commute from Fairfax all the way into Montgomery County, which means we go through the District of Columbia. The local officials and the CAOs, Chief Administrative Officers, and I meet regularly on DMV Moves clock and off of DMV Moves clock because we want to understand how we can get this all in one place and move it in a better way. The funding is an issue, obviously, because I have to report to a board of 10, who I'm going to say to them, we need X amount of dollars for Metro or for WMATA. We then have to go to the state legislature and get money from them. I just want to make sure everybody understands it's an integral piece, 3 pieces that we have to work with. Indexing the 2018 dollar amount, yeah, we wouldn't be talking about this today. We wouldn't be. We'd be talking about something else. It might be just our operational portion of WMATA. It wouldn't just be the operations and the capital, because those are 2 very distinct issues that we both we have to take into account and move forward. We in Fairfax County just did a bond debt for WMATA, and I'm going to tell you, the amount of emails I get on why we're doing this is just incredible. But those are from the folks who don't take the Metro. The day I took the Metro. Most days when I go into DC, I take the Metro. But it's apparent to me that we, as the leader, with the District of Columbia as our nation's capital, Fairfax County, Prince William County, Loudoun County, Arlington County, Alexandria, the District of Columbia, my friends from Maryland, we are the icon of the capital area, region. We need to understand that we have to fund WMATA. The question is, how do we get there? And we are working very hard to get there. in my humble opinion, I'm hoping that we can come forward with something no later than January to our elected officials, because it's going to take some time. Obviously, Randy did a great job with his budget. Thank you, sir, for fiscal 26. But 27 and 28 are going to be things that we have to address. We have to address them, and it's going to take us time to get them through, at least in Commonwealth of Virginia, through the state legislature. Obviously, with our help from our Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Walter Alcorn here, he knows exactly what I'm going to be asking for in the 2026 budget. The 2027 and 28 budget is going to be very key and critical to all of our region, to the state of Maryland, to the District of Columbia, to the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's about funding and getting us to a good state of repair. When you look at our escalators, we went from $500 million in arrears to $69 million. Escalators are very important, obviously, to the way we move people around. Today, when I drove in, a gentleman got on at Dunloring, thank you, fixed the door while we were riding to Metro Center. I gave him a fist pound, told him thank you. He looked at me, what are you doing, sir? Why did you do that? I said, because you worked the system to ensure that we were all safe. And that's the system that we need.
Thanks, Brian. And Brian, you hit on something that I wanted to talk a little bit about, which is, what is the arc of DMV Moves, what's coming out of it, and then what kind of happens after that. So, as Brian noted, it's our hope to have interim recommendations that will go back to the task force for their review early next year. We're hoping for January, targeting that. As the advisory groups, part of what we're doing is vetting the information, having some of the top conversations, and making sure the diverse kind of viewpoints of the various stakeholders in the region are considered there. DMV Moves will run through June. At that point, we'll really be handing this off to the elected officials. And you heard Chair Allen and Chair Shep talk about the importance of the business community and other folks to kind of engage when we get to that stage. But I also want to talk to you just a little bit about some of the work we are doing so that you understand how we're preparing these interim recommendations. So one of the biggest questions that came up in some of the advisory groups was, okay, well, we just did a large increase for WMATA's capital funding in 2018. How do we make sure we don't go back there again? Because one of the things we kind of heard over and over is if we're going to do this, we don't want to be here again in 5 years. And I want to give a lot of credit to Randy and his team, Tom and other folks who worked on this for us. We sat down, they ran the numbers, and they demonstrated, I think, to the advisory groups that with the $340 million and the 3% indexing, we can kind of reach that place where we have a sustainable state of good repair program at WMATA. That all started with the 2018 bill, and that really got us to the point where we had a reliable state of good repair program. But because of how that and PREA were structured ultimately, those have run their course. And so we're trying to vet these things and make sure that when we structure it this time and when we put out those recommendations to the task force and others, they can understand that these will be sustainable solutions and that we're not going to have to do this again in a number of years here. And so we're really trying to answer some of those questions that are outstanding there. Jack?
Well, from an economic standpoint, guys, let's just think about this. We have the third most hotel beds on the East Coast, right here in this area. Without a good metro system, people are not going to be using our hotel beds, i.e. won't be spending cash here, won't be able to do anything here if we don't have a good transportation system. PREA needs to be addressed, as Nick said, as Randy has said. We all need to understand this is an economic vitality issue. It is just not a transportation issue.
Yeah, and just to reiterate too, part of this process has really been, pushing Randy and his team to answer a lot of the questions that we've all had over the history of WMATA and our transit systems across the region to make sure that we really do understand the capital program. I would say that we have a much better understanding of that and are confident in the 340 number and moving that forward into a sustainable program. We're really digging into the operating cost structure now and understanding, as Randy pointed out earlier, understanding fixed and variable costs and what does that look like. It's likely that, what he was saying too, based on the fixed costs, there's probably a lot more service that we could provide. But what does that look like? And then what additional assets, particularly, capital assets like, equipment is necessary to make that happen. How many more people do we need to get on transit for our region to be competitive? I mean, that's a key question here. And then it's not just what does Metro or WMATA or the regional transit agencies do about that, but what do the rest of us do about that? What are businesses doing? What are we doing to encourage more and more people to get on transit? With the high satisfaction rates we're seeing right now, there isn't really a reason not to be using transit. Personally, I don't like driving around looking for parking spots or sitting in traffic. So if you can get from point A to point B much quicker, then let's figure out ways to do that. Again, from a business perspective, business community perspective, let's get the maximum return on our transit investments in this region. We don't need 14 transit agencies. That's our perspective. So figure out how we can best integrate those more effectively, from a cost perspective, but also from a rider experience perspective. And then also, too, we're going to continue to push hard on Metro, but we've got to give Metro room to manage the agency. So let's make sure going forward that we have the right balance and effective governance and oversight that gives us the confidence that they are managing correctly, but that they can do their jobs for moving people around the region. So we've got a number of things that we have to tackle here in the short term. And I'm really confident, based on where we are right now, that we can take those issues on and continue to do that. Another thing, Randy, too, you started to talk about the vision of what transit needs to be. The planning departments for all the different COG jurisdictions are continuing to forecast adding between 1 and 1.5 million people to our region over the next 20 to 30 years. With remote work, with the incoming administration, there's a lot of variables to that. But we can anticipate adding more people. And so figuring out how we're going to move those people around becomes a key challenge for all of us. And so Randy, we've talked about this, going to continue to push on you guys, really help to develop what that vision looks like, and what can we do, what is achievable within the constraints that we have so that we can address some of those needs. Very optimistic about the direction that we're going right now.
Well, so we're going to wrap up now. I really want to thank Brian and Jack for their work sharing these advisory committees. If you kind of take something away from this discussion today, I want it to be a few things. We're bringing all the stakeholders to the table. We're bringing the government partners, we're bringing the community partners. We've had a number of meetings. We're going to continue to have those meetings, and we're going to have the tough conversations. We're making real progress. A lot of things have started to be answered. There's still a few things we have to look at, particularly on the enhancement and other sides of the system. But there will be more to come. You'll start to see stuff early in the new year, and your voices are really, really important as we move to the next phase of this. And DMVMoves kind of puts out those final recommendations, and the elected officials start to consider those and think about how they're going to address the transit funding needs in this region. So again, thank you for coming, and now we're done.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your continued leadership and efforts in rallying on the DMVMoves Initiative. It is a critical time, and there is a lot of work to be done. Councilmember Allen also heard your note and heard your call, and absolutely very important. Understanding the history of the region and Metro in itself, we know that having a strong and willing federal partner is essential in any lasting solution. To that end, I am delighted to have the opportunity to introduce our a great regional champion, Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. Senator Warner is no stranger to anyone in this room. He has served as governor of Virginia from 2002 to 2006 and was first elected to the Senate in 2008. Now in his third term, Senator Warner is not only the senior senator from Virginia, but will also be the senior-most senator from this region come January. We all appreciate that he has established himself as a bipartisan leader during his tenure, and that he was a champion of the bipartisan infrastructure law that has provided generational investments in infrastructure. He is also one of our best advocates for our region, helping to secure funding for countless projects, including Metro and Long Bridge. Senator, in this moment of change, we appreciate your steady leadership when it comes to transportation and the full range of challenges facing our region. So please, everyone, give a huge warm welcome to
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you very much for the introduction. I really want to thank the Greater Washington Partnership and the Board of Trade. These sessions are so important. Although I do think if you introduce me now come January as the senior member of the delegation, does that mean I'm really old? No. Well, it does actually, but hearing that last panel, as a former governor, with so many people around this room that I've worked with over the years, it was a little bit like deja vu all over again. You know, so many of these issues have been with us for many, many years. I have to tell you, it really brought back a lot of battles and fights and issues, and it is a great break from what I'm going to be talking about a lot later today in terms of Chinese cyber hacking. Stay tuned on that one. There is no region in the country that is more concentrated on this hacking. And if you have not heard the term salt typhoon before today, rest assured you'll be hearing about it over the coming weeks and months. I'm a little crushed for time, which would be the good thing, so I'm not going to go on give you the whole spiel. I want to make 3 quick comments and then 3 pieces of advice for the region. First, on Metro, I want to join everybody in saying to Randy and the team, thank you for what you've done in terms of trying to right the ship. It's been a challenge, and with Paul and others, we've been all on this battle for a long, long time. I think I'm proud to have been a champion of the Metro funding, and I do think with Senator Crapo now as chairman of the Finance Committee, I have a very good relationship with him. But we should not presume anything is given in terms of that federal funding. We're going to have to fight tooth and nail for it. We're going to need everybody's assistance. I think it is also important that we continue to press the issue that the nation's transit system is unique, and because of the dangerous world we live in, brings security concerns that other jurisdictions don't have. And so the notional idea of how we continue to promote the idea of potentially plus up to $30 million a year on the security side, rather than simply the straight funding side, is a battle that I hope to make with the new DHS Secretary from day one. And the more we can get examples of some of the changes, we're going to need that ammunition to make the case to my colleagues. Second, Kathy mentioned this, but I think the most significant transformation, at least for those of us on the Virginia side of the river, over the last couple of years is Long Bridge. We got $729 million out of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, extraordinarily important. We just have one railway, both freight and passenger, across the Potomac at this point. It's at 98% capacity. And the backstory of what we had to do, not only in terms of money, but frankly, getting all of the legislative process in part to get the Department of Interior to transfer land. It's quite a story, but we do have the funding now in place. That will create about, I think, 17,000 new jobs and 1.8 billion to our economy. This is critically important. We've got to make sure this will double the rail capacity, not only in Virginia, but frankly on all north-south. Extraordinarily important. Third, we all commend the infrastructure bill. I'm very proud of that. I think the day of bipartisan gangs is going to be coming back very quickly, I hope. Lots and lots of improvements we've made in Virginia. I think, Shep, we've got about $7.7 billion that will come in on the transportation side in the infrastructure bill. But it's time for reauthorization. And we had a bipartisan group last time. Here's my strategy, though, on infrastructure, at least the bipartisan infrastructure bill reauthorization. If we can simply get all of the people who voted for it last time and all of the members of Congress who didn't vote for it, but came for the check presentations, we're going to be at 80%, even with the new Congress. But we need to start, making that case. Investment in infrastructure. We all know it's pay me now or pay me later, and this will be a critical component. Last couple of comments is I think we need to recognize that our region's got a target on it with the new administration. And when they start talking about taking $2 trillion out of the federal spend, or dismantling the federal government in structural ways, I mean, we need to all take a deep breath and think about this in whole new ways. So all of it, I think about what Jack said and Ron says, the idea that we've been talking about some of these things for years, we can't talk about it anymore. I think the first 9 months of the new administration is going to be our moment of challenge. We're seeing the president-elect move very quickly on appointments. And so I've got 3 asks for the community. One, and I say this to my business colleagues particularly, we've got to make the case from a pure efficiency and expertise standpoint. The notion of chopping up the federal government and sending it to remote locations all over the country, no matter how much of a soundbite that may sound as good, it is not, in any business standpoint, an efficient redistribution of how we operate what is critical to the future not only of our region, but our country. And we're going to need business voices to weigh in with Congress, the Republican colleagues. We're going to need to weigh in with our folks in the new administration to say, let's move past the soundbite. Let's think about efficiency and expertise. I think about it from the intel side of the fence. The ability to have folks at the CIA and the NSA and ODNI and NRO all talk to each other, meet in person on a regular basis, would be totally diminished if that was chopped up and spread around the country. You can take department or sets of agencies after agencies. And having that ability to grow the expertise in federal service and not be undermined, and actually move from one area of the government to another, is a value add and not a subtraction. But we need to take the new administration at its word and the new efficiency team and address that seriously. Second, and I know I'm preaching to the choir on this sector, we need to get our workers back in the office. It is more of a challenge if we don't have folks back in the office to say, well, we can't relocate this department or agency out to somewhere in the Midwest or on the West Coast. Third, and I say this again as somebody who has been a governor and realized the challenges of our region. I mean, I love the fact that we're the 5th largest, and I guess the New York region with Connecticut and New Jersey and New York has some of the same challenges, but we don't necessarily have all of the historic tri-state authorities that region has. The 14 regional transit commissions, we've got to show greater regional cooperation. We need to put more than words behind that. And I frankly believe, and I say this as a Democrat, we need to show regulatory reform. And if we can show more efficient examples of that, if we can start making those changes early on in the new year, you equip me to go to the new administration and say, you know what, this has been a challenge. The Potomac River has always been a challenge between Virginia and Maryland and our friends in DC. But look at what we are doing in a collaborative, more efficient regulatory reform basis. And actually having facts that I can present will be, I think, extraordinarily helpful. The delegation is united on this. We need to work, we need to not simply fight the new administration, we need to work with them. In terms of standing up for our federal workers, I will be there and have their back and standing up for the professionalism of our intelligence community. And while this will be a challenge, I also see it as an opportunity. The notional ideas that we've had over the years of moving to that greater regional collaboration, well, when the threat is $2 trillion coming out of a $6 trillion spend, and disproportionately we would bear that burden exponentially greater than any other region of the country. It's time that we continue the progress that's been made I think we will come out of this stronger, but we are all going to have to row in the same direction. And I particularly say to our business friends, we need you on this efficiency argument. Because if we can't make that, then we could look at a very, very different capital region a year from now. So better times to come. Thank you all for having me. Don't call me senior anymore. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Senator Warner. And a lot of things for us to be thinking about as we move forward here. And thank you for your just steadfast support for transportation across our region. And we agree this is an actual moment where we can think differently about how we as a region come together and use our assets much more effectively. Transit and transportation and a whole host of other areas as well. The Board of Trade's been at this for a long time. Sometimes it's interesting. The Board of Trade was founded in 1889. And way back in the 1900s, we were involved in the original drafting of the original street extension plans. We've been advocating for airports, we've been advocating for public transit, we've been advocating for bridges, we've been advocating for the American Legion Bridge. Paul wants to put you on the spot, but we will continue to advocate for resources needed to address that project and so many others. I mean, we are only as effective as how well we can get around. So let's continue to work together to make that happen. So I'm really pleased to bring up the key transportation officials from across the region to have a conversation with us next. So with that, I'd like to introduce Shep Miller, the Virginia Secretary of Transportation, Paul Wiedefeld, Maryland Transportation Secretary, and Sharon Kershbaum, the DC Director of the DC's Department of Transportation. Friends and colleagues also, thank you very much. And Adam Tux. So News 4 is going to join us to facilitate this conversation. So Adam, thank you for that.
I should know how the microphone works. This one works. Good to see everybody this morning. Thank you to the Board of Trade. Thank you to the Greater Washington Partnership for having me here. I love asking questions, especially transportation questions. Sharon loves me when I ask her about bike lanes. She's been telling me a lot about that recently. But no, this is really a great opportunity for all of us to get together. It's a shame we're crunched for time because I was going to roast Randy for about 30 minutes here, but I don't have that time, so we got to get right into it. And I think we can just go down the line and start with what everyone has been talking about. Metro really is the tie that binds all of us together in this region, and you're starting to hear much more about not just having to fund Metro. I mean, we all know that. I've been covering Metro for 20 years. And it's always the same thing, almost every year. We need more funding for the transit agency. But how do you do that? What is the mechanism? And I think for the first time, really, in recent history, we're starting to hear more about things like a sales tax, some sort of dedicated tax that would go toward funding the transit system, a way that everyone kind of pays their fair share. But what is a fair share? Let's start with Secretary Wiedefeld. I mean, Paul, so if we think about it from Maryland's perspective, sure, a sales tax could go to Metro, but you also have a transit system in Baltimore to think about. You have an airport to think about. How would the state of Maryland specifically look at something like a sales tax and then decide whether or not that's the right option?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting us here. Yeah, as you mentioned, we're a little different in that we are a consolidated transportation department. We have 6 1/3 modes, right? A third being the Metro, being the third portion of it, and we fund it out of one source. And we fund Metro totally out of that source as well. So it's a challenge that we're facing now across the board. So we have roughly $1.3 billion hole in our current program. We've had to stop all construction projects that were under construction. We've had to basically stop all projects that are green and environmental. We're basically do not have the ability to match all federal dollars. So that is a much larger issue for us. So yes, the Metro is very important, and we're obviously going to support it, but it has to be done in that larger context. And whether that's other revenue, sales tax, or any other source, that will be a discussion that we'll have in our legislative cycle coming up. But for us, it's a much larger issue to address. and not just the Metro by itself, because I have MARC, I have commuter bus, I have local operating transit system, I have American Legion Bridge. So there's just a series of things that we have to wrestle with here and there.
I mean, you know it well as the former head of Metro. I mean, the funding challenges that go for it. Is a sales tax viable, in your opinion? Do you think that makes sense?
It could. I think, I know there's been a lot of work done. I think we also have to really peel back some of the complexities of what we're facing now in terms of different travel behavior. I mean, the sort of hard numbers, when you start looking at them, there was almost a decade plus where ridership was roughly almost 700,000 boarding per day, and now on the rail side, now I don't know where we're, but in the 400 range. So with that came a lot of revenue, right? That is no longer there. So that is part of this problem that we have to sort of get our arms around. So yes, obviously there's the need for more money, but if we're providing a service that is valued very highly in the upper 90s, right? But yet travel has changed. So how do we wrestle with that issue and the loss of revenue that those additional riders brought to the table? So I think it's a very complex issue that we're all trying to still understand, and it plays out in our highway system, and it plays out obviously on the commercial office space market. It plays out at so many levels. So I think just to look at it sort of, which is one aspect of it, is important, but I think I've broadened our view of this issue.
Okay. Director Kershbaum, obviously we know how important Metro is to the entire region, but specifically to the district. The mayor, full supporter of it, a former Metro board member. Do you think DC would ever get on board with an additional tax to go toward the transit system, another funding mechanism, and what kind of discussions have you had on that level?
Thanks, Adam. And the good news is the DMVMoves process is giving us great scaffolding to really explore what the alternatives are. I can just say we as a district are completely intertwined in terms of the success of Metro, so finding a sustainable funding source is critical to us. Our revitalization of downtown is really dependent on a healthy transit system, and we know when people are riding Metro or taking a bus, they're on their feet and they're walking and they're going into retail and commercial enterprises, and that is all really pivotal to helping us revitalize back downtown. So we need to make it happen. We are open to all of the alternatives that are on the table, and really glad that we have the DMVMoves process to help shepherd through a good choice.
All right, and Secretary Miller, what's the climate like in Virginia when you hear year after year, Metro needs more money. Okay, we plugged the gap this year, then we're back the next year. Metro needs some more money. Do you think it's time that there's a dedicated source of revenue directly for Metro, other than what's coming from the federal government?
Let me dispel a myth in Virginia. We have a dedicated source of revenue for WMATA every year. It's dedicated, it's locked up, that's where it's going, and it's dedicated. The problem is, in WMATA's eyes, is not enough. So we do have a dedicated stream, and I would agree with those folks who would take issue with a 16-year-old PREA and capital funding formula that hasn't been changed and set and static. I don't personally believe that's ever a good thing, and because here we are, we do that many times in government. We set something and we leave it alone for 10 years and then we fight about it again. And in the meantime, you get sort of jacked around, and I don't think that's a good process, so I don't like that. Let me say this, that we're excited about the management at WMATA. We know they have a very tough job, and we salute Randy and his team. But we have a different view in some respects. And I'll tell you, Randy talked about the savings and $275 million and this and that. And they're doing good, hard work. And listen, they've got some difficult issues there. But they saved $50 million out of $2.5 billion. $50 million, okay? And that's not a big number to us. So we still think, and yeah, there are all sorts of issues, and we don't have time to get into that. The fixed and variable cost, and the sort of the sprawl of the system, and the density of the population base here versus where the Metro goes. My colleague talked about the decline in ridership and shifting patterns and what all that means. But at the end of the day, Virginia's funding about $600 million, almost $700 million this year. into WMATA, and the concept of another couple hundred million or 300 million is not going to sit well in our administration. How the rest of Virginia looks at that and what a following administration may or may not do, I can't speak to it, but it's really tough when you go down to Taylor's Landing in Southwest Virginia, has been decimated by hurricanes and so forth, and say, you know, we got to take this money and put it into more money, another couple hundred million more into WMATA. Now, having said that, we all know how important it is, right? So nobody's against WMATA, nobody doesn't believe in transit. We just need it to be more efficient and more cost effective than it is. And that's a difficult chore that Randy and his team have, and they're working hard on.
So it sounds like you think there's more operational savings that they could be looking toward, or something along those lines, before we get into a discussion about additional funding?
Well, you know, I just say this, you got 50 million on 2.5 billion. You tell me.
All right, well, there you go, there you have it. Let's talk, you know, I want to get as many topics in here as I can, and I know that we're tight on time. 5 years ago, when I had the honor of hosting this event, we signed what was called the Capital Beltway Accord. I didn't sign it. The governors of Maryland and Virginia signed it, and at that time it was Governor Northam and Governor Hogan, and they said that we are going to soon have a new American Legion Bridge. And we do not have a new American Legion Bridge. We have the same American Legion Bridge, which by some estimates is going to have to be replaced in the next 10 or so years, or something significant is going to have to be done with it. That's at least from what I've reported and what people have told me. Paul, what's going to happen with the American Legion Bridge?
Again, it gets back to this core issue that we just talked about, right? There's a dollar attached to that we have to figure out. Obviously, there's a critical need just to maintain that bridge, obviously, and make sure that it continues to function. And then longer term, what does that look like? That's a different issue. But the initial issue is how would we fund something of that scale? At the same time, we're wrestling with how do we support the metro system, which is so important. But you know, from our perspective, they're all important, right? And we've got to work through that, and we will. You know, there's a lot of things that just changed that, you know, are in play now that we have to rethink. How does that play out on that project and other projects across the state?
Do you see a new bridge in the next decade or so, or something being done?
Obviously, we're going to have to do something to that bridge and make sure it functionally operates, right? Because as you know, you just mentioned whatever time frame you mentioned. You know, it's clearly a functional issue that we have to deal with. Whether or not that is different than what we see out there today, that's a different issue.
Director Kershbaum, I'm not trying to skip over you, but I am going to skip over to you just to come to this side of the Beltway. Secretary, from your perspective, from Virginia's perspective, you know, you can't do too much to it because it's under Maryland's control, the Legion Bridge. So what should happen there? You guys are building express lanes right up to it, pretty much, kind of leaving it open in terms of what's going to happen next, whether or not Maryland decides to run express lanes across the bridge and then onto the Maryland side of the Beltway. What, in your opinion, should be happening with the Legion Bridge right now?
I think that's a Maryland decision, sir. It's a sovereign state. We built up to the edge. We're more than willing to partner with them and have been. But that's their citizens and their government's decision, not Virginia's decision. We certainly have an opinion what we'd like to see, but I think it's a bit presumptuous, frankly, for one state to tell another state how they have to operate. That's not who we elect to run us. And I think Mr. Wiedefeld and his governor and the legislature, they need to make that decision. Obviously, it's a problem, right? It's a transportation problem, and it affects people in Virginia, so we have a thought about it. But at the end of the day, it's a problem that they need to solve. We'll certainly support them any way that we can that makes sense to us. But I think it's a Maryland issue.
With all due respect, though, a lot of the problems that we run into when it comes to transportation is this lack of regional thinking, right? And a lot of this DMVMoves stuff is regional thinking. A lot of the things that we're talking about here is not acting as own separate individuals, but working together. So is it your purview that they should just figure it out and then you'll go along with whatever they do?
Well, it's their, you know, under the laws of our government, it's their decision, not ours. We can sort of play in that pool a little bit because we are a region, and obviously we have an interest that's aligned in terms of the region. But at the end of the day, it's going to be Maryland dollars that fund it. It's going to be Maryland that makes the decision, and that's the people that are funding it, the people that own it, should make the decision, not their neighbors, in my view. And so, yeah, it impacts us. We want it to be improved. I think the Secretary and the Governor want it to be improved. They have real issues that they're trying to balance there, and we understand that. And so we're ready, well, and able. We've been supportive along the way. We'll continue to be. We'll partner with them. They partner with us. But until you form some sort of regional government that has true taxing power, and I just don't see that happening in the near term, then the government that owns it needs to own it and run it, and not some other government.
All right. Director Kershbaum, speaking of bridges, one of the main things, you and I had a sit-down interview, and you told me that the Roosevelt Bridge is going to need to be replaced at some point in time. Everyone up here is talking about funding challenges. No one is making a secret of that. Changing commuting patterns, all sorts of different things and different challenges. Is that project still on the table? What can you tell us about that?
Sure, absolutely. So the Theodore Roosevelt Bridge has been in pretty serious deteriorating state, and we will begin construction in 2025. It's going to be a 4-year process. So not only is it a major upgrade in terms of the deck and the piers, we're actually going to be expanding the sidewalk along it, so it's 4 feet now. That'll be a 10-foot trail. So we're really excited. It will not only sustain and make sure we have a long-standing bridge, but really help encourage folks to use it for reasons other than the 95,000 vehicles that cross every day.
Gotcha. So one of the projects that we can look forward to is the Roosevelt Bridge one coming up in the near future. Another big thing that's been going on in the district, I'm going to let you keep talking, is the Clear Lanes bus program. This has gotten a lot of attention with the Metro buses now that can go and pick out people who are in bus-only lanes. And I've heard from so many people who have said, but I wasn't even stopped in the bus lane. But you were in the bus lane, right? And so it's hard to have sympathy when you told people, you warned people, and then here come the fines. But nevertheless, what's the update with that? I mean, we've seen thousands and thousands of fines, but it speaks to also the problem of people clogging up bus lanes, right? Everyone's talking about a regional bus network or a fast-moving bus rapid network system. You can't do that if people are clogging up the bus lanes, right?
Absolutely, and I'm going to just give a quick contextual description of why they're so important. So our priority bus lanes, and people think of those as the red painted lanes, they're the dedicated bus lanes. There's many other features in terms of queue jumps, in terms of other signaling that helps the buses move more efficiently. We often rebalance where the stops are, so the buses can move more efficiently. So the priority bus lanes alone really reduce travel times by about 15%. When you then couple it with the enforcement element, which is the Clear Lanes program, and that is cameras on the buses, we have seen the efficiency of these buses go closer to 25 to 30% in terms of travel time. So yes, nobody likes to get a ticket. We see this big arc when we start with the cameras where there's a real spike in the beginning as people figure out that this really matters and I'm going to get a ticket. But we've noted already within a few months about 50% fewer violations for driving in the priority bus lane. So people's behaviors are changing. And I get feedback a lot from people that are frustrated sitting in traffic downtown. And they often will point to the priority bus lanes as that's chewing up a travel lane. And we just really need people to understand that the way we can address congestion is not by removing those bus lanes or bike lanes, but by having more, because they make traveling by bus a real option for folks who didn't want to take an hour to get in, but now if it's going to take 35 minutes, and people who are sitting in traffic see the buses passing them by, it becomes a more and more inviting alternative. So they are so critical to the future where we're going. In terms of the downtown revitalization, in terms of really addressing some of our traffic volumes, and so they work. So yes, you might not like the ticket. We have video clips to prove. So when we get a complaint, we actually have evidence to show you were in the wrong, and so those complaints really do die down.
And you're always able to fight it. You're always able to fight it. You did good. Good
Just
job.
tell them to follow the law, right?
Talking about moving fast in traffic, and by the way, we are going to leave about 5 minutes for questions at the end here, so if anybody has a question that we didn't get to, you want to bring up a point again, we'll do that at the end. Talking about moving fast in traffic, Secretary Miller, talk to me about toll lanes. Northern Virginia, 66, the Beltway, 95, right? There's talk about expanding on the south side of the Beltway express toll lanes. Do you think they've made a measurable difference in Virginia? There's obviously strong opinions on both sides, and should Virginia be looking at more of those?
They certainly have their place. And Virginia has been greatly benefited by them in many ways. You know, I'm the guy that came to this job, having been on the Transportation Board for years, and tolling in and of itself, just the collection of tolls, is a very inefficient system to collect revenue. It's very inefficient. And what we've done in Virginia differently than that is we've used them more to manage lanes. Right? So it's not about the efficiency of the collection, it's about managing lanes and moving traffic around and giving opportunities and options that wouldn't otherwise be there. And so we've had some great partnerships with some toll providers, some of which are here today. I came up the express lanes this morning, hour and a half, basically. I think Jacob was an hour and a half. Breeze right
From
on
Richmond?
through, from Richmond.
All right.
It was reliable, it was on time, here we are, things were good. And I looked over to the right, and there were some people that were in a reliably congested area as well. So we've used them successfully, very much so. And to my earlier point, we're continuing to look at opportunities. We're looking at bi-directional on the 95 express lanes. It's a tough one, it's going to be expensive, I'm not sure how we can do it, but it certainly would be a game changer if we could. We're also wanting to explore and look at, and we're already doing this, express lanes on 495 East. And I'll tell you, it gets back to that regional discussion that we had, and for good reason, I think, because of air quality. There's a regional body that needs to make sure we keep air quality good in this region, and I think that's important. And you can sort of argue over the specifics of all that, but in general, I think that's a good concept. But at the end of the day, Maryland and DC and Virginia have to decide whose roads are going to get built, and they get to decide on each other's without funding them. And I don't think that's a good model. And frankly, we're kind of stuck in there right now where we're having some pushback from people outside Virginia, in Maryland particularly, who maybe don't want us to have express lanes in Virginia. And it's not even talking about going into Maryland, it's just in Virginia. And so we need their support to get there, and frankly, I'm a believer that you let the state do what the state wants to do. If you need to portion that pollution somehow and do credits or whatever you do it. But I don't want to tell Maryland how to run their roads, and I don't think Maryland should tell DC or me how to run ours either. We need to collaborate, we need to do it together, but at the end of the day, we have voters and people that pay in each of those places, and they're the ones that are supposed to make those decisions. So it's a very difficult situation that we're in there. It would be a great boon if we were able to do it. We would reduce emissions, we'd increase HOV, we'd increase bus and transit, and people would have a reliable trip to the Potomac as I did from Richmond coming up here today. So they have their place. They've been very beneficial to Virginia, and we're looking at expanding them at least in those two areas.
This kind of piggybacks to you. I think he's talking about the Wilson Bridge, right, going across through Alexandria, across the Wilson Bridge. There's obviously been pushback from Maryland leaders and some people in Virginia, we should say, as well, about building those across the bridge. Where is the state's position?
But let me be clear. This isn't about building across the bridge either. If I stop them in Virginia at Route 1, they still get to decide whether I do that or not. It's not about whether I could come across the bridge. Coming across the bridge, Maryland owns the bridge. It's a Maryland decision, just like the other bridge. It's a Maryland decision. I'm not weighing in. I'd like them to do it, but I don't own that, right? So we're not talking about just building lanes into Maryland and not having their permission. We're not talking about that at all. We're talking about building lanes only in Virginia. But still, DC and Maryland get to tell us, in essence, whether we can do that or not. I don't think that makes a lot of sense the way it's constructed.
Secretary?
As you know, that bridge was designed for potential future transit line, so we definitely want to explore that initially. We'll work with Virginia. I know there's a bit of a process we're still in the middle of right now, but our preference obviously is to eventually have transit across that bridge.
Okay, lightning round time. Really quick question for the group. Who owns Union Station? Everybody want to raise their hand? Everyone has a little slice? No, not you?
Union Station Corporation,
That's
whatever.
right. Director Kershbaum, just because it's in the district, obviously there's a lot of movement. I know the Hopscotch Bridge behind the station, that's really kind of the first piece of the puzzle. I took a train trip a couple of years ago, I think it was during the height of the pandemic, up to New York with my family. And I'll be quite frank, it was disheartening to walk through Union Station the way that it looked at one point. It's starting to make a comeback. What do you see for the station in the future?
We're really excited about the plans. We know how critical it is as an asset for the region. The district's nexus is fairly limited. Obviously, the H Street Bridge is kind of the first stage of all this work, and we will be starting that soon, and that really does not only involve upgrading the bridge, but we're moving the piers so that we can expand the tracks and we can add more tracks. So that's kind of a critical piece for their infrastructure, and we want to make sure that it's designed in a way where we don't have commercial buses, clogging the area. We're trying to have things really improved in terms of the environment, improved in terms of the flow around it. So we're here to support it, and we think it's going to be really critical in the region.
And I mean, this is obviously important for MARC service, for VRE service, those kind of things.
It is important, but to me, Union Station sort of reflects my first point, which is there's something going on in the market. Nothing changed at that station, except people aren't using it as much because they're traveling different. Things have changed, right? But where it was, in a year's time, nothing happened there that changed that, except the market changed. And again, that's sort of the complexity that we're wrestling with that, again, plays out in several levels, and that's another prime example of it in my mind.
Union Station's a great, iconic place. Virginia has invested money into DC to get to Union Station for the Long Bridge project. And Virginia obviously has an interest in the operational activity at Union Station. I think the hard part is to how to take the operational requirement and turn it into something more than that. Union Station is not just operational, it's much more than that. And frankly, the benefit is different depending on where you live, right? So we've got a lot of use of Union Station, a potential increase in Union Station, so it needs to operate as a good train station, and that needs to have some amenities, right, to be a good train station. But it doesn't have to be incredible, right? And so if you want to make it incredible, and it's going to cost a lot of money to make it incredible, and a great economic engine, who reaps the reward of that? And so that becomes the struggle. How do we put money into something we don't necessarily reap the same reward from? And is it operational, or is it something different from that? So that will be the thing that will be debated and figured out. The numbers are staggering that they've used, and so we'll see how it goes.
My own personal observation, if I could just put my 2 cents in, I miss that circular bar that used to be in the middle, and that we used to be able to go into. I think we should bring that back. That would be a good one, for sure.
One vote for bring back the bar.
The circular bar right in the middle. Let's do that. Okay.
We'll take a survey. There you go.
Instant support. All right, we have time for a couple of questions. If anybody has a question, please.
Yes, good morning. My name is Delegate Jamila Woods. I am a state representative from the state of Maryland, Legislative District 26. I'm very concerned about the comment that was made about Maryland not being in agreement with the express lanes. I represent District 26, which is the bottleneck where Maryland, DC, and Virginia meet. And the proposal of express lanes for that particular area has been proven to be very dangerous, as anywhere we see there's a bottleneck, it increases traffic accidents. Also, it does, in fact, including an express lane, does, in fact, impact the state of Maryland. Maryland is not included in any of the benefits of that express lane. We were hoping to help reduce carbon emissions, to help reduce the number of accidents that are occurring in our area, to move a metro train into that area. The other thing is that it is extremely important to know that that particular area where that express lane is proposed is where Highway 210, anyone of you who know about Indian Head Highway 210, is considered the highway of death in the entire nation, not just the state of Maryland. That is also a place where where that express lane would be dumping into. That is why this is a major concern for my legislative district and my area. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of passion about this, but let's see if we can get another question, and if anybody else has a question. If not, we can weigh in on that. Anybody else with a question from the crowd? Okay, no, so, sure. Did you want to weigh in on that comment?
Hey, listen, I appreciate the concern. I'm talking about building in Virginia. Obviously, things that happen across the border have an impact. I get that. But I'm talking about building in Virginia. I'm not talking about building in Maryland. I'm not talking about obviating transit. We've been very clear, extremely clear, over and over in writing. And it's the law, by the way, that that corridor has to remain open for transit. And if we put anything else there, and Randy's and his team are able to get Metro there, but you can ask him how long that will be. If they're able to get it there, we will remove what we put there and bring it back to where it was, and that's a guarantee. And so this is not about obviating transit. This is about, that's not going to happen for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, if ever. And in the meantime, we're clogged up, we're polluting the environment, we have unreliable traffic, people are wasting time, and I can go out there and make it better for all those people in a few years, and we're not allowed to do it yet.
Paul, real quickly, we got about a minute left. Where's the purple line? What's going on with it? Good progress?
Yeah, purple line's moved very well. As you know, we pretty much have come out of the ground, which has made a big difference. We're out of the University of Maryland, for instance, which was a huge issue for our flagship university.
I haven't heard about the traffic there at all.
What's that?
I have not heard about the traffic
No,
there.
there's, for sure, and I mean, particularly in this area, you know, just think back, 30, 20 years of all the traffic impacts when we built Metro, and it's very, very painful, I get it, but we all know the long-term benefits of that project, just like we did with Metro. So we'll get past that as quick as we can. We're pushing almost 70% done. We're looking at 27 to be totally done and have it open for revenue service. So no, it's going very well.
All right, well, I think we're, 10:50, no, 11. My clock just said 11, sorry. I was gonna try to sneak one more in. I hear we have a hard out 11 o'clock. But thank you to the panel today for everything. Thanks so many might stick around for extra questions. Thanks for having me. Thank you, thanks guys.
Thank you to the Board of Trade.
Thanks to the Board of Trade, thanks to the partnership.
Appreciate it.
Thanks guys.
All right, Adam and Shep, Shannon, and Paul, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you all for joining us today. We just want to close things out.
Okay, we're gonna be quick. This is always the fun part I get at the end, to get everybody to be quiet for one more minute. I want to thank everybody. Every voice is so important. The work that you're doing is so important. We clearly have a very significant charge ahead, and today was a great example of great minds coming out, and now going forward we have a lot of work to do. So I do want to thank our guests. I want to thank our speakers for their willingness and their incredible insight in sharing where we are today and where we need to go going forward. Jack, I want to thank you again for the partnership. Again, this is our 7th year, and these conversations are critical today, but as we move forward, so at a minimum, we will see these faces collectively next year, but by next year, I hope we are driving the progress that we need to, Randy, and the work that we are doing together, but as we have these significant investments and projects throughout the region. Thanks, everyone.